You think you love, but you strangle. You believe you connect, but you possess. Every relationship you've ever called sacred has been contaminated by your desperate need to own what cannot be owned, to freeze what must flow, to capture what lives, only in its freedom. This is the fundamental lie that has poisoned your deepest connections. That love means holding tight, that intimacy requires ownership, that connection is achieved through control. You've been conditioned to believe that the tighter you grip, the more you care. The more you worry, the more you love. The more you need, the more you give. The more you fear losing something, the more valuable it must be. But what if I told you that your very clinging is what destroys the connection you so desperately seek? What if the hands that reach to embrace are the same hands that suffocate? What if your love has become a cage painted in beautiful colors, and your care has become a chain wrapped in silk ribbons? You confuse clinging with connection. And in that confusion, you've lost both the thing you sought to hold and the capacity to truly love. You've become a collector of relationships rather than a participant in them, a hoarder of experiences rather than someone who lives them, a possessor of moments rather than someone who flows with them. Look closely at your most cherished relationships. Notice how they buckle under the weight of your expectations, how they wither under the pressure of your needs, how they die slowly in the suffocating embrace of your fear. This is not love failing. This is your misunderstanding of love creating its own destruction. From the moment you drew your first breath, you were taught that love means never letting go. Your parents held you close and called it protection, but they were teaching you that safety comes from control. Your teachers demanded your unwavering attention and called it education, but they were conditioning you to believe that connection requires possession of another's consciousness. Your culture whispered to you through 1,000 subtle messages that permanence equals commitment, that security equals love, that possession equals devotion. You absorbed the toxic teaching that if someone can walk away, they don't really love you, that if you're not worried, you don't really care, that if you're not jealous, you're not invested, that if you don't need them, you don't want them. You learned to measure love by its intensity of desperation. The more someone needed you, the more they must love you. The more you needed them, the more you must love them. You confused dependency with intimacy, anxiety with affection, fear of loss with depth of feeling. You mistook the vertigo of insecurity for the thrill of romance. Watch how you move through your relationships like a collector gathering treasures for a museum that no one else is allowed to enter. You demand promises like insurance policies against an uncertain future. You extract commitments like contracts that will somehow guarantee what cannot be guaranteed. You build walls of expectation and obligation, then wonder why you feel so alone inside them. You don't love your partner. You consume them, digest them into your narrative of who they should be for you. You don't befriend others. You harvest them for emotional security, mining them for validation and reassurance. You don't connect with life. You attempt to possess it, to nail it down, to make it behave according to your desperate requirements. Even your spiritual seeking has become another sophisticated form of grasping. You cling to teachers like children, cling to security blankets. You possess practices like trophies that prove your dedication. You hoard experiences like a dragon hoards gold, always seeking the next high, the next breakthrough, the next thing that will finally complete you. You turn the pathless path into another prison, the flowing river of wisdom into another stagnant pool of accumulated knowledge. You make even enlightenment into something to be grasped, owned, achieved, and displayed. You cannot see that your very seeking has become another form of the same disease that poisons your relationships. This is the bitter price of your fundamental misunderstanding. Relationships that suffocate under the crushing weight of your need, connections that wither under the relentless pressure of your expectations, love that dies slowly in the desperate grip of your fear of abandonment. Alan Watts understood what the ancient Taoists knew in their bones, that the universe operates on the principle of Wu Wei, effortless action, natural flow, the profound wisdom of non-interference. The river doesn't clutch desperately at its banks while flowing toward the sea. The sun doesn't hoard its light out of fear that tomorrow it might have none to give. The tree doesn't possess its leaves, trying to prevent them from falling when autumn comes. Nature demonstrates the deepest truth about connection. It arises not from grasping but from letting go, not from holding but from allowing, not from controlling but from flowing in harmony with what is. This is the paradox that your calculating mind cannot grasp, but your intuitive heart can feel in its depths. That you can only truly have what you're willing to lose, can only truly love what you're willing to let go, can only truly connect with what you allow to remain free. The sage connects with all things precisely because he possesses nothing, demands nothing, expects nothing. The master loves deeply and completely precisely because she needs nothing from that love to complete herself. The wise person experiences the most profound intimacy precisely because they place no demands on that intimacy to be other than what it naturally is. Connection, true connection, is not a bridge you build with the lumber of expectation and the nails of demand. It is the spaciousness between things that allows them to dance together without losing their individual rhythm. It is not the rope that binds two separate entities into an artificial unity. It is the emptiness that allows authentic movement, genuine response, real meeting between what is already whole. When you finally stop trying to own the sunset, you discover that you can see its beauty for the first time. When you stop trying to possess the music, you realize you can finally hear its song. When you stop trying to control the other person, you experience what intimacy actually feels like when it's not strangled by your needs. The Tao teaches us that water, the softest thing in the world, overcomes the hardest, not through force, not through grasping, not through trying to possess or control, but through yielding, through finding the natural path, through flowing around obstacles rather than trying to smash through them. Now imagine a completely different way of loving. A revolutionary way of connecting that emerges not from the poverty of neediness but from the abundance of inner completeness. Imagine a love that gives without depleting itself, like a spring that flows, not because it must empty itself but because flowing is its nature. A connection that grows stronger through space rather than weaker through distance, that deepens through freedom rather than shallow through control. This is the love of the overflowing cup, not the desperate, grasping love of the empty vessel, forever seeking to be filled by others. It is the love of the sun that shines not because it needs to be seen, not because it requires applause for its performance, but because shining is simply what the sun does. It is the love of the river that flows not because it seeks desperately to reach the ocean, but because flowing is its essential nature. This new virtue of connection doesn't arise from the fear of abandonment, but from the profound abundance of presence, your ability to be fully here, fully alive, fully yourself without needing others to complete the picture. It doesn't spring from the anxiety of loss, but from the deep satisfaction of inner completeness. It doesn't emerge from the hungry ghost of insecurity, but from the serene fullness of someone who has learned to be alone without being lonely, complete, without being closed off. When you love from this place of inner abundance, something miraculous happens to your relationships. They transform from spaces of mutual neediness into spaces of mutual freedom. Your connections become dances of discovery rather than contracts of mutual imprisonment. Your intimacy becomes a celebration of what is actually present rather than a desperate negotiation for what should be different. The person who loves without clinging becomes magnetic, not because they pursue others with desperate intensity, but because they allow others to be themselves without agenda. They become attractive not because they need others to complete them, but because they overflow with their own completeness and invite others to do the same. They create profound connections not because they grasp and hold and demand, but because they provide spaciousness for authentic meeting between two sovereign beings. This is love as the Tao intended it, natural as breathing, effortless as flowing, water, spontaneous as the dance between wind and leaves, love that connects without binding, that touches without grasping, that embraces without possessing, that cares without controlling, love that enhances rather than diminishes, that liberates rather than imprisons, that celebrates rather than consumes. In this way of loving, you don't lose yourself in the other person. You find yourself more fully. You don't disappear into the relationship. You appear more clearly as who you actually are. You don't sacrifice your authenticity for connection. You discover that authenticity is what makes real connection possible. But here is the deepest teaching, the most difficult truth for the clinging mind to accept. Even this liberated love, this flowing connection, this abundant giving must know its seasons of withdrawal. Even the most generous river must sometimes retreat into the silence of its underground source. Even the most radiant sun must set to rise again with renewed power and fresh light. There comes a time in every relationship, in every connection, in every love, when the deepest wisdom is to step back, to withdraw, to let the space between you and the world expand into sacred emptiness, not from hurt, not from anger, not from fear or resentment, but from the profound recognition that all connections, no matter how pure, no matter how flowing, must breathe. They must have rhythm. They must pulse between coming together and moving. Apart, the master of relationships knows when to engage and when to retreat. The sage of connection understands when to flow toward and when to flow away. The wise person recognizes that even the most beautiful dance must have pauses, that even the most perfect symphony must have rests, that even the most profound conversation must sometimes dissolve into meaningful silence. This withdrawal, this stepping back, this temporary dissolution is not abandonment. It is the deepest form of care. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is disappear for a while, to give others the sacred gift of your absence, to allow them the space to discover who they are when you're not there, defining them, supporting them, or even loving them. In this silence, in this temporary death of connection, something profound and mysterious happens. The ego that sought to possess begins to dissolve like salt in water. The desperate need that drove all the grasping simply evaporates like morning mist. The fear that created all the clinging transforms into trust. Not trust that everything will remain the same, but trust in the process of change itself. The part of you that was always reaching, always wanting, always trying to hold on to something or someone, grows quiet. And in that quietness, in that sacred emptiness, you discover what was always there beneath all the noise of your needs. A vast, spacious, naturally connected awareness that doesn't need to possess anything because it already contains everything. From this emptiness, this temporary death of all your strategies for connection, a completely new form of relating emerges. One that has been purified of all possession, cleansed of all control, freed from all the fears that drove your clinging. A connection that arises not from the poverty of need, but from the abundance of being, not from the emptiness of incompleteness, but from the fullness of presence, not from the anxiety of fear, but from the serenity of love that asks for nothing. Kalki, question that burns in the space between these words and your heart is this: are you ready to release your white-knuckled grip on what you think you love in order to discover what love actually is when it's not strangled by your fear? Are you prepared to let go of the familiar prison of clinging, with all its painful security, in order to experience the unfamiliar freedom of true connection? This is not a gentle suggestion for gradual improvement. This is not advice for better relationship management. This is a radical invitation to transform the very foundation of how you relate to life, to others, to the mystery of existence itself. It requires the kind of courage that most people never find. The courage to love without guarantees, to connect without contracts, to care without the insurance policy of control. It demands that you trust something deeper than your strategies, something more reliable than your ability to manipulate outcomes, something more sustainable than your capacity to hold on. It asks you to trust the process of life itself, to believe that what is truly yours will never leave you, and what leaves you was never truly yours to begin with. If these words have touched something deep in your chest, if you feel the truth of this teaching resonating in the depths of your being like a bell that has been struck, then make this commitment concrete. Write these words in the comments below, but write them as more than characters on a screen. I choose connection over clinging. Let this be a declaration of your willingness to love with open hands instead of closed fists. Let it be an announcement of your readiness to connect with an open heart instead of a defended fortress. Let it be a commitment to live with the radical trust that teaches you to hold everything lightly and let everything go freely. The path of true connection is not for those who want easy answers or comfortable solutions. It is not for those who seek to improve their techniques of possession or refine their methods of control. It demands everything you think you are and promises nothing except the possibility of discovering who you actually are beneath all your strategies for getting what you think you need. Continue this journey into the heart of what it means to be authentically human. Dive deeper into the wisdom that liberates rather than the knowledge that binds you to old patterns. Discover what lies beyond the reach of your grasping hands and the grip of your desperate heart. The river of true connection is flowing past you right now. The dance of authentic intimacy is beginning in this very moment. The love you've always sought is here, waiting in the space between your reaching and your letting go, between your fear and your trust, between who you think you should be and who you actually are. Step into that space. Let go of that grip. Choose the connection that comes not from clinging but from the courage to be free.